Yo people, so I want to do a follow-up video to the last video I'd done talking about Liverpool and the Heysal disaster, and shout out to Giovanni Ferrari. I'm presuming you're Italian, bro, because that's literally the most Italian name you can get. So shout out to Giovanni Ferrari for hooking me up with this, because last night I went to sleep thinking I was going mad, and maybe I imagined this thing because I couldn't find it anywhere. So I googled it and I found this article. So if you look, this article was actually written on the June the 10th, 1985. So a couple of weeks after the Heysal Stadium disaster. Now here what it basically says is that the Belgium people didn't discourage drinking. In fact, they encouraged it, and they opened temporary beer stalls all around, and that the Liverpool fans were drunk 12 hours before the game. So obviously that's a recipe for disaster, and I would suggest all set up on purpose. So if you look at this bit here, at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, a Liverpudlian was stabbed, but not seriously, by a Juventus fan. Oh, obviously that much drinking over that period of time, the Liverpool fans were hammered, littering bottles and urinating in the street, which, you know, that was happening at Euro 2020 when I was in Trafalgar Square last year. You know, this is what happens when you get that many people drinking over a period of time. So it goes on to say that a marauding group stole £165,000 worth of jewellery, but the police theorised it could have been people dressed up as Liverpool fans to cover their tracks. But you can see how this was all becoming a recipe for disaster. So during the game, it says here, these were the Italians that videotapes showed battling with the Belgian police, and the case of the 22-year-old Umberto Salasgolia, if that's how you say his name, apparently firing a pistol, a starter's gun by some accounts, loaded with blanks after the dead bodies began to pile up. Now, you know, I'm glad that I remembered this and that I'm not going mad, because there is still not a single image of this on the internet that I could find. Now, bearing in mind this article's from 1985, it says here, strangely until last week, Liverpool fans had, by British standards, a reputation for good behaviour. So they weren't even considered to be the worst fans in 1985 at this point. Bearing in mind they were winning trophies, so they weren't pissed off. Now, Giovanni Ferrari tried to send me a link, but it wouldn't send it because YouTube obviously wouldn't allow him to click this link. Bro, I'm presuming this is the link that you were trying to send me. I still can't find an image of this guy with a gun. If this is the link you were trying to send me and you can spot it, let me know where it is. But this basically shows the Juventus fans fighting the police with weapons and all sorts, and this is what I remember.
Et maintenant, la parole est pour
Vedendo lancio di oggetti, le stanghe, i bastoni in mano, la polizia che cerca più che altro di difendere se stessa, perché erano in pochi i poliziotti. Ecco, qui ci sono questi poliziotti che si riparano insieme ai cani. Certo, appare che tutti gli altri siano indifesi, perché non si vede come quei poliziotti potessero difendere chi che sia. Qui sta per riprendere, per avere inizio la partita, non per riprendere, per avere inizio la partita. Quindi la tragedia è già successa. Tra poco vedremo che ecco, i giocatori entrano in campo e qui sta per finire la nostra brevissima telecronaca.
So as you can see, this is Italian fans fighting the police with weapons and throwing stuff, and the stuff they was throwing was basically because the whole stadium was crumbling. It should never been played in this stadium, but of course this is why it was played in this stadium, because they set it up perfectly, because they knew that it was crumbling. And it was even asked before it to change the stadium, and they didn't change the stadium. They wanted this stadium for this reason. So just to put in context, obviously Heysal was 1985. I witnessed 80s football violence. The first game I went to for Man United was Man United Tottenham, 1982, 17th of April. Man United won 2-0, and Steve Coppell scored a penalty. And Steve Coppell was my favourite player, and I remember this game. I remember being in the ground. I remember being in the top of the Stretford End in the seating area, looking down into the Stretford End, and I remember seeing Tottenham fans fighting Man United fans in the Stretford End. So my first game of football, I was witnessing from afar, but with a good view, 80s football violence on the terraces. Now, bearing in mind, back in the 80s, all football grounds had serious fencing up with metal spikes. And this is Old Trafford here, and I was at the top of that seating area looking down. Now, at the time, I was 6 years old, coming up to 7 years old. So, you know, this was a crazy experience, but I got to be honest, I absolutely loved it. Not because I loved the violence, but because I just loved being in this atmosphere. And I was with my dad and his mate, and I was safe. You know, I never felt threatened. I was far away from this violence. But it was just part of what was going on in those times. But I loved being around it all. It was all just, you know, it was an incredible experience for a 6 and 7 year old kid. Now, other games, I remember being down the front of the terrace in here, and with my face through the iron gate, holding onto the bars, looking at the football through the iron bars. I mean, this is just crazy. I still can't believe that was actually happening at that point in time, after going to football for many times through the 90s or whatever, when they got rid of all of this. It just is a crazy situation in the 80s. It was madness. Now, I saw a Liverpool Man United game, and I can't remember when it was, but I'm presuming it would have been 82, 83. And we were outside the ground. I was with my dad and his mate, and there was a scuffle, and I remember the scuffle, still picture this. And obviously I was like small, because I was 6 or 7 years of age. And my dad sort of grabbed me, like, make sure I was all right. And I remember seeing this scuffle, and I remember seeing a red-handled disposable Stanley knife, like this one here, exactly like this one here, fall to the ground. And because I was little, no one else saw it. And I saw it, and I was like, oh, like, there's a disposable Stanley knife, like my dad's got in his toolbox. You know, that's what I remember thinking. Oh, look. You know, so I was literally witnessing 80s football violence at the age of 6 and 7. That's craziness. Now, there was a period that we went to a few games in those early 80s years, but then my dad stopped going. So I'm presuming that after a few incidences, my dad decided to not take me to watch the football anymore, because it sort of filtered out. And it must have been around 1984, 1985 that, like, we stopped going to watch Man United. So yeah, 80s English football violence was getting to a crazy point in the mid-80s, building up for the Heysal Stadium disaster. Now check this article out and what it says here with this guy, a Liverpool fan that went to the game. 1985 was different. It needs to be seen in context. The year leading up to the Heysal was the most violent period I remember. It wasn't just football. There was the miners' strike with clashes on the picket lines across the country. Every night we were seeing pictures of the conflict in Northern Ireland. There were troops out marches which met with hostility. The British movement and the National Front were on the streets. And that's before you even get to football. The FA Cup semi-final against Manchester United at Goodison Park a month before Heysal was the worst violence I've ever seen. It was off the scale. So, as you can see, football violence was crazy at that point, but the 80s was crazy, and especially up north, with all the job losses and the way they were affecting them north. But all of this here, the British movement, the National Front, all of this is social engineering, all created on purpose to stir up and divide and conquer and create hostility and division and fighting and whatever else. And then this next bit. What happened in Rome the year before changed our attitude too. Roma fans stabbed, slashed and attacked us in massive numbers. Scores of people had knife wounds. So when we got Juventus in the final, people were wary. It wasn't let's pay the Italians back. We knew Turin was to Rome what we were to London. It was more like no Italian will ever do that to me again. It was more tense. Then it goes on to say here, during the day at the game, about 3 p.m, the ale kicked in. They started shutting the bars. The mood was turning. A jeweller's got done over. I went looking for more beer and the supermarket was getting looted. We got our beer. So what it says there is by 3 p.m, the ale had kicked in. But if you notice, going back to this, at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, a Liverpool fan was stabbed. So it all ties in with about that period that it all went off. And if I'm going to look into this, I'm going to say 2:30, that is 2-3, that is 2 threes, that is a 33. So I would just suggest that it was all part of the plan. And he goes on to say here at the top, I didn't see anything I considered unusual or particularly violent. But then it says here, then the Juventus end started fighting with the police and came round the track and attacked our end. We were going crazy. We thought we were under attack. So my point to all of this is that not that Liverpool fans were innocent, although I believe this complete thing was socially engineered to happen. It is that English Liverpool fans got blamed for this. The English fans got blamed for this, hence the 5-year ban. And some Italians did get taken to court and done for this. But why did the Italians get no 5-year ban? Why is history painted that this was all about how bad the English, and in particular the Liverpool fans, were on this night, when I've just shown you evidence to say that this was both fans causing problems, and in defense of the fans, this was socially engineered. This was a satanic ritual. Hope you enjoyed this video. Peace!